Alright, good morning, students. So this morning we're going to look at what is known as photosynthesis. And as for this concept, it is the process by which living organisms make their own food. And I'm quite sure that person should at least be familiar with the term, where they would have, of course, heard the term before, photosynthesis. So as for living organisms, plants can make their own food, but animals cannot. For example, human being or any other animal, we cannot make our own food. But of course, plants can make their own food. So the process by which plants make their own food is what is called photosynthesis. Right. So in terms of definition, this is the process by which plants make their own food. Now, in terms of the plants being able to make their own food, there are some conditions that must be present. There are some substance or chemicals that must be present in order for this process to actually take place. As in on the slide, the second pointer actually start to give you some of those conditions that must be present in order for this process to actually take place. So they are saying that some raw materials are required, and the raw materials are water, which will come from the soil. Then you have a gas that is called carbon dioxide, and this, of course, normally obtain or come from the atmosphere. Right. So if I should ask you to give me or state the raw materials that are needed in order for photosynthesis to take place, then of course you should give me water and carbon dioxide. Now, as for the process, it needs some form of energy to actually allow it to take place. So the energy that photosynthesis requires actually come from the sunlight, which come from the sun. So they are saying that the energy from sunlight is used to split water molecules into oxygen and hydrogen. So remember that water would be one of the raw material, and of course the water will be obtained from the soil. So the root of the plant is what absorb or take up the water from the soil. Right. So once the water is in the plant, when the sun shine on the plant, now they are saying that the energy that comes from the sunlight actually break up the water into two new substance, and those are called oxygen and hydrogen. So they are saying that the sunlight also help to convert carbon dioxide and water to glucose. So the sunlight basically have two functions. One is that the sunlight split the water molecule into oxygen and hydrogen, and they are saying down for the last pointer there, the sunlight, of course, convert carbon dioxide and water to glucose. So those are the two functions for sunlight as it relates to the process of photosynthesis. Now, this process normally take place in two stages. So we have a first stage that is called the light reaction stage, and the second stage is known as the dark reaction stage. Now, as for the light reaction stage, the reason why they call it light reaction stage is simply because the sunlight, the sunlight will of course be present. So this stage, the light reaction stage, basically take place in the presence of sunlight. So that is why they are saying that it is known as a light reaction stage. So the pointer is saying that this occurs when the light energy from the sun is taken in by chlorophyll in chloroplast. So there is a part of the plant cell, which of course would be in the leaves of the plant, and that section of the plant cell, of course, that is known as the chloroplast, contain a part that is known as chlorophyll. That is where the energy is trapped, um, which comes from the sunlight. So if I should ask you which part of the plant trap the energy that comes from the sunlight, then I should tell them that it is the chlorophyll, which is located um, in the chloroplast. Right, so the second point, so the energy now that is trapped by the chlorophyll, they are saying that this energy is used to split the water into hydrogen and oxygen. Now, looking at the image, that's up the light reaction stage. Right, so that is the light, and it is saying absorbed by the chlorophyll. So you actually have the water that which would come from the soil. So now it is actually showing the sunlight splitting the water, which is right there. So that is the oxygen. So they are saying that the oxygen will actually go off to the atmosphere or go off to the air. So what this simply means is that once oxygen is produced in the leaves of the plants, it does not continue in terms of in the photosynthesis process. So plants don't need oxygen for photosynthesis to take place. It is just that yes, it will produce or it will release simply because the energy that comes from the sunlight will split the water into oxygen and hydrogen. So oxygen is basically given off as a waste product during the process of photosynthesis. So the oxygen that we breathe in, that's where we get it from. Because during the process of photosynthesis, simply because the water did split into hydrogen and oxygen, which the plants would give off the oxygen. Now the hydrogen, now follow this arrow, so the hydrogen basically continue down into the next reaction that is known as the dark reaction. So the image here showing you the lighter section, showing you what take place during the light reaction stage of photosynthesis, while while the darker section showing you what take place during the dark reaction stage of photosynthesis. Right, so in terms of what take place during the light reaction stage, um, of course there's a difference in comparison to what take place in the dark reaction. So of course persons should be able to differentiate and tell what take place in the light reaction versus what take place in the dark reaction stage. So moving down to the dark reaction, minimize this. Right, so as to what take place in the dark reaction stage, they are saying that this is where the hydrogen combines with the carbon dioxide to produce sugar, or if you want to say glucose. So in the dark reaction stage, you will see hydrogen there on the image, and then you're seeing the carbon dioxide, which showing that it actually comes from the air or the atmosphere. So that carbon dioxide normally human being normally breathe out that carbon dioxide, for example. And also once you start a motor vehicle, coming from the exhaust or what you call the muffler, carbon dioxide also come out of it that way. And of course, once you're burning any form of garbage or rubbish, once you light a fire, then carbon dioxide actually release as one of those gas in the smoke. So those are places where carbon dioxide come from to go in the atmosphere. So carbon dioxide for human being, for example, we don't need carbon dioxide. We produce carbon dioxide as a waste product, but plants actually need it. Because as you can see in the dark reaction stage, carbon dioxide is needed because it is what combine with the hydrogen to actually form what is known as glucose. So the process of photosynthesis, it basically takes place in two stages. First, you must have a light reaction stage, because there is no way the dark reaction stage can take place without a light reaction. So because the light reaction stage must take place, and that is simply because the dark reaction stage need hydrogen to combine with the carbon dioxide. So if the light reaction stage don't take place, then there will be no hydrogen. Because remember that it is the sunlight that split the water into oxygen and hydrogen in the light reaction stage. Then the hydrogen would move on to the dark. So there is no way plants can make their own food without sunlight. So sunlight must be there because the energy from the sunlight has a very important function, and its function is to split the water into oxygen and hydrogen. So in terms of the equation, it is a must that you know the equation for photosynthesis. So we have two equations for you to study. We have the worded equation and we have the chemical equation, or if you want to say the symbolic equation. Right, so persons have to ensure that. Yes, I'm hearing. Yes. Repeat. What sun give plants? That now the energy from the sunlight actually split water into hydrogen and oxygen. That is the benefit of the sunlight toward in relation to plants. So in order for plants to make their own food, they have to get hydrogen, and the hydrogen is actually in the water that they would absorb from the soil. So what they are saying, yes, so what they are saying is that the plants cannot just get the hydrogen out of the water like that. The energy from the sunlight is what is needed to split up the water, break up the water so the hydrogen can be separated from the oxygen. So that's the benefit of the sunlight. What the question you ask when the parents give you a glucose? No, well, that no, that would be manufactured from sugar cane, So manufacturers they can actually make glucose. So when you consume that glucose, then your body don't need to break it down anymore, because glucose is the simplest form of carbohydrate. So glucose, yes, it can be purchased, but as for the plants, in plants, glucose actually in the format of what is called carbohydrate. So you can just get glucose directly from plant like that. You will actually get carbohydrate from plants. Now when that carbohydrate goes through your digestive system, then your digestive system will actually break down the carbohydrate into glucose. So in terms of your parents giving the glucose, that is what they would have done that in factories to actually break down the carbohydrate to glucose, and then they can sell it like how they sell sugar, for example. So it is not the plant that your parents actually get it from. They would have to purchase it somewhere simply because it would have been manufactured or being broken down from carbohydrate to the glucose by a manufacturer, which of course have the machine that is capable of breaking down carbohydrate to glucose. All right, so in terms of the equations, it's a must that you know the equation. So we have the worded equation, and as you can see, it said carbon dioxide plus water, and you have the forward arrow that mean in the presence of sunlight. Then you have the chlorophyll below, and on this side, on the right side of the arrow, now you basically have the products of photosynthesis, which of course are glucose plus oxygen. So in terms of photosynthesis, you must know the condition that is needed, and the condition that is needed is sunlight. The raw materials that are needed are carbon dioxide and water, and the products that are normally produced are of course glucose and oxygen. And in terms of the chemical equation or the symbolic equation, there you have it down the bottom. So it is a must that you know those equations, because you will be asked in terms of writing those equations. Alright, so all plant leaves help photosynthesis. So all those leaves of plants help this process. Alright, so as for the leaf now, they are saying that they are thin and flat, which increase its surface area. So that simply means that the fact that the leaves, the fact that they are flat, mean that they can trap as much sunlight as is possible. So the leaves of the plant is what absorb the sunlight. So the surfaces of the leaves contain some tiny holes or some tiny pores. Um, and these tiny pores, they are saying that carbon dioxide will now diffuse from the atmosphere through these pores. So basically, the leaf of the plant have two functions. One is to get the energy from the sunlight, and two is to absorb the carbon dioxide from the sunlight. As the carbon dioxide is very important, because you will realize that it is the carbon dioxide and the hydrogen that actually combine or join together to form glucose. So the oxygen that is produced, and that of course that is the oxygen that is produced during the process where the sunlight was split in the water, and the oxygen now need to now diffuse or go out to the atmosphere, because as I said, oxygen don't the human plants don't need oxygen to help make photosynthesis. It is just that oxygen is released during that process. So they are saying that plants use some of the sugar they make for respiration, and that means that they use some of the sugar for their own energy, to provide energy so that the plants can actually stay alive. So like sugar cane, for example, we would get some of that sugar from the sugar cane, while some of the sugar will help to grow the sugar cane. Now for persons who plant cane, you will realize that the cane that is planted in the shady, or cane that is under shady where it is not getting a lot of sunlight, I'm not sure if person would realize that those cane normally they are not as sweet as how they're supposed to sweet. And that is simply because the sunlight is not catching the cane. And once the sunlight is not catching the cane, then the light reaction stage of photosynthesis is hardly taking place. Because remember that in the light reaction now, you have the water being split into hydrogen and oxygen. So if there's no hydrogen in that sugar cane, then in the night time when the carbon dioxide need to combine with the hydrogen to form that glucose or sugar, that not going to take place, simply because there's no hydrogen to combine with the carbon dioxide to form the sugar. So fruit trees that actually give you sweet fruit or sweet food, those plants need sunlight, because remember it is the sunlight. Again, why you're sharing a screen and I'm sharing my screen? Don't share your screen, man. I need my Student need to see my screen. Alright, so oxygen diffuse out. Plants use some of the sugar they make for respiration. So they are saying that most sugar are converted to starch, and which of course starch would be a complex carbohydrate. And now, so starch is stored in the leaves and the stem, also the root of the plant. So plant, of course, store carbohydrate in the format of what is known as starch. That's what it actually stored as. Right, so starch is the stored format of glucose. So in terms of glucose being stored in plants, it normally stored in that format that is known as starch. So when we consume the starch, then of course that is the format that we consume it. So it is our digestive system that will break down the starch into the simpler format that is known as glucose. Alright, so the next pointer, the importance of photosynthesis. So of course this process is very important. They are saying that it provides an energy source that can be used by other living organisms. So simply because plants make their own food, so we now can depend on plants to get some food. So that is one importance for it. The second pointer, it maintains the correct balance of oxygen and carbon dioxide level in the atmosphere. So what that is saying is that plants provide oxygen, and we use up that oxygen while we give off carbon dioxide, and the plants take up the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So that is why they are saying that of course it actually provide that balance. So we provide the oxygen, and we provide the carbon dioxide, and the plants provide the oxygen. So to provide food for the growing human population. So because plants make their own food now, then we can actually get the food, um, so that we can get energy, and we can get food components or material to ensure that our body parts are being developed accordingly. So that's the importance of photosynthesis. All right, so I realize that a lot of persons say that they are present in the WhatsApp group, but as for on Google Classroom, I'm not seeing those persons. So I really hope that those persons they are actually watching the video, because I don't know why they say that they are present in the WhatsApp group and they are not online in terms of being on Google Classroom. So students, so I post the notes. Okay, yeah, so please do that. So the notes, so please ensure that you write the notes. I send the notes in WhatsApp, and the notes is also on the Google Classroom. So ensure that you write the notes. Now the box here I'm asking persons, please ensure that you draw this box. So in terms of differentiate, you can shade the bottom section that represent the dark reaction, and the top section just leave it as it is in the book. So the bottom section that said dark reaction, just use a pencil and give it a light little shade, and that will show that yes, it is a dark reaction stage. So ensure that you draw that box when you are writing the notes on the light reaction and dark reaction. So you don't need to draw the box 2 times, because after the notes for light reaction, you will have a dark reaction. So ensure that you draw the box. Alright, students, so ensure that you're marking in present, and can move on to your next class.